so much of a indoctrinated faith where we're called to believe certain things, but instead it's more of a faith that is covenantal and based on living out the faith, and therefore we live out our faith through a focus on justice, for example. So another one of the questions is, how do we actually live it out in a concrete way? An example would be, many faiths have an annual meeting. We do too. And in June this past year, our faith was going to be focusing on Indigenous issues. But then, and this was planned for long in advance, but then the racial issues erupted in our city and in our country and in the world. So we changed the topics and some of the focus. And so we shared the stage with Indigenous issues to also bring forth many racial based workshops to help to educate our folks about the issues about this situation. We also have in Kentucky a brand new justice-based organization within our denomination. It's called KUJAN. It's Kentucky Unitarian Universalist Justice Action Network. And the fact that this wasn't necessarily created to address racial injustice issues, but just justice issues in general, because we are very much dedicated to justice issues. So it allows us to interface with other congregations and just be a little more effective than we might be congregation by congregation. So our denomination statewide is now united in our justice efforts. In our own particular congregation, I'm the minister of First Unitarian Church of Louisville. In our own particular congregation, we have a couple of different ministries that have been addressing the racial crisis in our city. We have a medic van ministry where medics have medical supplies and snacks and ice and water. And it's basically a portable medic unit that goes out to Injustice Square, goes on the marches with the protesters. So there's just a medical presence there. And we also have a water and ice ministry where congregants have just established this organized effort to have water and ice down at Injustice Square. This has been going on for months now. And it's just our way. It sounds like a small thing, but it's our way of contributing in a concrete way. There was a very concrete thing that happened just last night at our church. As you know, there were many activities going on in the way of protests last night. And our church became a bit of an epicenter for protesters to be used as a sanctuary. There were a couple hundred people here last night. Several protesters spent the night. We had people here all night. We had the jail support people here providing services. The medic team, of course, was very, very active. We had an evacuation team with people providing shuttle services so people could get to their cars because of the curfew. We're now looking into, just this morning, this is just hot off the presses, looking in to try and offer the same kinds of services while the curfew remains, because people aren't safe out in the community in the evenings, but that's when a lot of gatherings happening and a lot of activities happen. So it's important that people have a place to be, and we're working to make our church one of those places. So again, it's a very concrete way for our congregation to be engaged in this fight. Another one of the questions that the panelists were asked to address is, how do we personally, like me as a minister, engage in racial justice? I've brought the issue of racial justice to the pulpit several times recently with talking about white supremacy and talking about the different kinds of protests. For example, I think it's easy to just immediately think that non-peaceful protest is not a legitimate way to have a voice. But I've tried to speak to that to say, let's try and keep our minds open and interface with the Black community to better understand how all of these forms of protest actually do have some legitimacy. Also, I'll be doing a service in the coming weeks on reparations. So it's just an example of trying to not only talk about it theoretically, but actually to bring it to our worship and our sacred gatherings, because indeed, I think it is a part of the holy gatherings that we have, and to speak to these issues in that kind of a setting is also very, very relevant, I think. Also, I was arrested a couple of weeks ago right after the Kenosha, Wisconsin shootings. I was so deeply affected by that. There are so many things that have happened and continue to happen. That particular event affected me very deeply. And I think it's because I just couldn't believe, after everything that has happened since March with Breonna Taylor's murder and since then, that such a senseless act of police brutality would occur. So anyway, I was involved in one of the marches, and I just thought, I'm going to engage myself with my body here this time. So the protesters that were with me, sat down on the bridge. Perhaps some of you were aware of what happened that day, a couple of days ago. And anyway, I've never been arrested before, and it was kind of scary. I was actually sitting down. They made us sit down before they handcuffed us and took us away. And I was actually tearful for just a brief amount of time, just about a minute. And I would like to tell you that my tears were mostly based in a solidarity. I had been thinking a lot about the people in Africa hundreds of years ago who were pulled away, just like we were being pulled away in shackles. Us by choice and peacefully, them not so. So I would like to tell you that my tears were based mostly in sorrow for that. And that was the case partly, but mostly it was just because I was afraid. I've never experienced anything like that. And it was my way personally, yes, as a representative of my congregation, of my faith, but just as an individual to say this isn't right. And I'm standing up, or in that case, sitting down on that bridge to say so. So anyway, these are some of the ways that I've personally involved myself. So how do we do more? What do we do to continue these efforts? Two things I would say in that category. One is to follow the lead of our Black brethren. It is their fight and our fight to join into, but they know the direction they want it to be taken. And so for us to listen, I think for those of us who are on this call who are white, as white allies, we often have a lot of exuberance and good intentions to move forward. But I think it's important to listen to our Black brethren and take their lead. The second thing I would say is to continue to educate ourselves on what it means to be a part of, an active part of white supremacy and white privilege. We live white privilege. It's a part of the culture. It's the air that we breathe. It's what we've been born into. And often it's hard to see the forest for the trees. And I think it is critical, if racial justice is going to come forth, that white allies be a part of it. But I think the first thing that we have to do to be true in our allyship is to appreciate our own white supremacy and how we live it out every day. And that's not to shame anybody, but simply to become educated about what it is, so we can work on that part of it in our own lives and in our own groups and in our own congregations, and then be more equipped and educated to step forward as allies to join the Black community to really take this on in a meaningful way. And clearly, we still have work to do, as evidenced by what came forth from the Attorney General's office yesterday. There's work to be done. Thanks so much for listening. I'll hand it back to Christina.
Thank you for your insights. Those were really, really moving. Next, we are going to hear from our friends from the Baha'i. I believe Andy has a video he's going to pull up to kind of get the introductions going there. So Andy, I'm going to have you get that video going.
Did you share the audio also, Andy? I did not. You're doing great, Andy. Zero pressure. Yeah. All right. Oh, yeah.
Know ye not why we created you all from the same dust? That no one should exalt.
The essence of faith
is sweetness of words and abundance of deeds.
Tread ye the path of justice, for this verily is a straight path.
Fix your gaze, under all conditions, upon justice and fairness.
All right, we have representing the Baha'is, we have Ivy Samaki.
Hello, everyone. As you know, those were just quotes from the Baha'i writings, and basically what I was saying is that know ye that no one should exalt himself above others. That is one of the things that we live by. The Baha'is do not have clergy, and so each one of us speak. We have to practice and take responsible for our own spiritual development. And everything that I'm sharing with you today is basically in my own individual perspective as a Baha'i. We have one of the primary principles of the Baha'i faith is the elimination of prejudices of all kinds. And as a Baha'i, one of the things that I have learned, and that is a quote from the administrative body of the Baha'i faith, is that America cannot reach its full potential until we address the issues that are historically rooted into our society, and that is institutionalized racism, prejudices of all kinds. And we have to, as individuals, address those issues. And that's what individual Baha'is try to do by participating on an individual level in various activities in their community in a nonviolent and continually educating themselves on an individual level. I, for one, have actually gone back and revisited my education. And in doing so, I discovered that the things that I learned in school was not always the things that actually happened in our country. And I, as an individual Baha'i, am re-educating myself to actually know the history of our country and to help perpetuate the real history that African Americans contributed to the building of our country. And what I have done with my African American friends and non-African American friends is to invite everyone to actually go back and research the history of our country to see that the African American community have contributed so much to building America. And I think until we recognize everyone's contributions to building America, that we will not resolve the issues that we're facing. And I think that I, for one, truly love the land of my birth. But I, for one, as an African American, believe that until the contributions of every of our ancestors have been acknowledged, that we can move forward and build our country. I believe in independent investigation of truth. And that means that each individual is responsible for individually how our country was built and appreciating every single part of our history, acknowledging it without guilt. And in doing so, you're acknowledging a disenfranchised group of American that have died and shedded their blood for the building of our country. And again, I'm speaking as an individual and as a Baha'i, and that what I'm trying to do is to make sure that my friends, both white and Black, can appreciate everything that have contributed to the building of our country. And in doing so, the things that we're seeing in our community will be resolved, that we will try to eliminate the institutionalized biased behavior that is now being, that have been perpetuated. And that the only way that we can do that is on a grassroots level, actually having meaningful conversation and rediscovering our history and realizing that the history that we learned in school is not always and is not all inclusive. And so as a Baha'i, I am trying to live my faith by independently investigating the truth, actually seeing every single individual for who they are, whether they're Black, white, immigrants, that we're all here to actually make a better world. The betterment of the world is through pure and kindly deeds. And the only way that we can do that is when we look into our hearts and acknowledge our own biases, no matter what they are, and then be able to reach out and connect with other people that look different than you. And you'll find so many commonalities. No matter what religion, Baha'is believe that all the religions stem from the same source. All humanity stem from the same parents, and that we're all created from the same source. And that until we recognize our true brotherhood, we cannot have true unity. And so I taught my children are teaching their children, and that as a Baha'i, that's the life that we should live. That we should live a life that we're constantly learning and discovering and realizing that we are all stem from the same source. We believe that men and women are created equally. We believe in one basic religion, that everything comes from the same divine source, that there is only one God, the creator of the universe, and there is only one human, the human race. And we come in multiple colors and shades and races, but we're all stemming from the same source. And until we really believe that and we live that, we cannot create a better world. And there are millions of people in the world that believe this. And our job is to spread the word that we're all one human race. And that when we see each other struggling, it is our job as individuals to reach out. And basically, when I was asked to do this, I can only speak for what I've learned and what I believe as a Baha'i in this community. I've lived in this community for 30 years, and I've raised 2 children, and they have raised 2 children. And we have that belief system, and we have tried to set an example for every single person that we interact with. And that is my contribution to this gathering. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivy. The third person that we are going to hear from is Annette Manley Turner. She is the Executive Director of the Office of Multicultural Ministry from the Archdiocese of Louisville.
Do you want to tell her she's muted? Annette, you are muted. If you're there. Annette, your microphone is muted if you're there, if you're speaking.
I'm okay now, huh?
There you go.
Can you hear me? Okay. I said that I'm excited about being here with you today. It was good to hear Ivy speaking. Have a great deal of respect for the Baha'i faith and the people that are reaching out into the community. So I was really thrilled. And I thank you for inviting me actually to be a part of the conversation. I thought long and hard about what was going on. I didn't get the message until late evening because I've been doing a lot of training, but I couldn't help but to say yes, because I really do believe if you're not a part of the solution, then you're a part of the problem. Our community is sick right now and it's hurting. And all of our faiths, all of the community organizations want some relief. But I want to start by saying we're where we are today because we've not had an opportunity to we've not had an opportunity to come together to really have those necessary conversations that will move us beyond the discussion, if you will. So I'll start with the original question that was asked, which of course was, let me get to it here. It was, how are our teachings addressing the issues related to injustice? The Roman Catholic Church is a very ancient religion. I say that because those of you who are aware of the existence of various religions know that we've been around a long time. Now, as it relates to Black Catholics, although many people think that we are new to the church, we predate many other Catholic members in this church. But we do look at we have many doctrines that we can, and as well as we have many scholarly work that was done to address social injustices. However, we look to the 7 themes of the Catholic social teachings. Now, I'll go over them, but the one I'm going to focus in on is life and dignity of the human person. Within those themes, we have a call to the family, community, and participation, rights and responsibility, options for the poor, dignity of work and the rights of workers, solidarity, a care for God's creation. To be quite honest with you, a lot of those things can fit under the umbrella of life and human dignity. We talk a great deal about making sure, and we try to live it, making sure that the Catholic social teachings is in fact, that we are responding to it in such a way that all can find a home in the church. But you, like me, we know that when we start talking about the social illnesses of today, which of course for me is systemic racism, that we have a problem even within the Catholic Church. And so we are dealing with that on many levels. Some of the work that was done by Father Brian Massengale on racism in the Catholic Church, which is a book that I'm encouraging people to read, because he really does. He cuts through the chase and he gets right to the point. And so we're allowing ourselves, all of us, hopefully, but we certainly are stressing the need for us to re-educate ourselves on what it truly means to live out the Catholic social teachings. Exactly, what is it asking of us? What is meant by life and human dignity? Well, when Mr. Floyd's life was taken in the manner that it was an awakening for not only the Roman Catholic Church, but for the world, And as Roman Catholics, I had a large number of people who were Filipino, Vietnamese, people from the African diaspora, the other islands, and our white community saying to me, how on earth can this happen in this day and time when we believe in life and human dignity? I say to them, as I'm saying today, that we all played a role in that behavior. And in playing a role as Catholics, we've got to speak up when we see something wrong. And I believe the late John Lewis said that. When we see something wrong, speak up, speak up. We haven't been speaking up as a community. And I'm not just talking about Catholics, I'm talking about the Louisville community. We've not been speaking up in a manner that people can really hear our voice and to hear it collectively. And so we are really looking to Catholic social teachings to be really open up and examine and looking at every aspect of it, and as an attempt to address some of the ugliness that exist in our community and in the world. Now, one of the things that was, one of the questions was, how do we live it out in concrete ways? Well, you know, the easiest thing that we can do, and I think all of us have done it, let's have this dialogue. Let's have this dialogue. But I think what people tend to forget is after the dialogue, then what? And so we have certainly have had conferences over the years. I remember when I did a lot of work with Church Women Unite, with the study circles, and it goes on and on and on. It's great to have those conferences, but at some point you have to take action. But we have been doing conferences, we do dialogues between different racial groups. There's a program that I'm so proud of that we developed over 30 years ago, which is called Moving Toward Oneness, which is, it started out as a prejudice reduction process, and then I went back to rewrite it. And I says, we don't want to reduce prejudice, racial prejudice. We want to eradicate racial prejudice. And so that program, we just did a rewrite on that, and it's been used all over the US. And then the latest is Open Wide Our Hearts, which is a pastoral letter on racism, a committee formed by our African-American bishops, actually was given the charge to come up with a pastoral letter on racism. And this would have been actually the 5th writing on racism for the Roman Catholic Church. The first one dates back to the 1800s. So they realized there were problems even then. And then there is a lot of training, internal and external training going on, because you do have to look at your home first, meaning we needed to do some training within the Catholic community, focusing on implicit bias and racism, because you know there's an awful lot of denial going on, so much so that people are finding it very difficult to believe that we have the problems that we have now because everything is so great. And once they go through the trainings, they understand that it isn't as great as we think it is. And then we're proud of Circle of Friends. It's something that I've just started, and it's an opportunity to gather people from different races and religious groups to over a meal. And while we're there having those meals over a period of 4 gatherings, we address issues and we try to unify, to collectively look at how might we work together. And you notice the word is work, the operative word is work together to address the social illnesses. Now, what's really great is I got reacquainted with the Baha'i community a few months ago because I was on a Zoom call and I heard the voice of a dear friend, Dr. Cyrus, who I started out many years ago with. And so we've been trying, the Baha'i faith has been really, really opening up its doors, and we are opening up ours to really have these new meaningful relationships. But unfortunately, the virus is keeping us from getting together, preventing us from having the meal, because you have to form relationships. And that's something that people, it's difficult to do over Zoom. And so, but we're looking for ways to come back together to make that happen. We also realize that our children are victims of the social illnesses that exist in our community. And one way that we are addressing this is through JCAR. JCAR is Junior Cultural Awareness Retreat. We're unable to do it, again, because of the virus. But if we were living under I'm not even going to say the old normal, but prior to the virus, it would be an opportunity to get youth together that were in middle school. And it's an overnight experience, ending with having a big unity meal with their parents. And we focus on the gifts that each person brings, more of a plural cultural experience, and that why we really do need one another. And it is our belief that we have to start with our young people, with our children. We owe it to them to show them, to model for them, model an environment that really celebrate diversity in ways that they can learn, and hopefully that they can not only learn but live it. One of the other things that we have done, and we did it with moms, the group Moms, is that we recognize the violence that's in the community, and people are hurting. They're hurting, and part of what we did in the past is to come together with different organizations, with different religions, and we had a beautiful, beautiful prayer service last year, and we hosted it at St. Martin de Porres Catholic Church. But my grandson was there, and he was taken. And he, at that time, he was, well, he's 12 now, but he just turned 12. And he really thought he knew everything. And when he heard the different prayers being spoken from different languages, he was mesmerized. And he said to me, I know you taught me that God hears everybody. He said, but this is the first time it really did mean something to me. He said, because everyone that got up to speak, he said, Gigi, I couldn't understand. He says, but that God was listening to all of us. And this is what was so meaningful to me. He says, maybe we really were intended to live together as one people. Now that we know we're not going to be able to do that experience this year, because you're talking, you could be talking as many as 400 people to 500, but we do look to get back to that. How do we personally engage in addressing racial injustice? Well, right now, we're doing a lot of Zoom conferences, Zoom conversations. As of this week, we have offered over opportunities for more than 400 people to engage in Zoom conversations regarding racism. And it is ecumenical, and it's racially diverse. And where we are now, and people are saying, what's next? And so one of the last questions that they deal with is the question regarding systemic racism. What does it look like? What role have I played in it? How do we want to stop it? And one of the areas that we address is, how do we stop this in our faith communities? How do we stop this in our workplaces? And it goes on and on and on, but what's really great about it, we've formed a lot of new friendships, and I'm pleased with the 400 plus people that have participated. And my plan is to put something in writing. Where do we go from here in writing, and make that available to the public? And then the other thing that we are doing, and we're encouraging people to do, is to take the opportunity, really take the opportunity to enter into the sacredness of another person's story. Because there are a lot of people that do not feel that people who are African American or from the African diaspora, that we have a history. they do not understand the enslavement era or anything prior to that. It was just 2 weeks ago, I was at this major board of trustee meeting, and they were talking about their excitement, because they were getting ready to celebrate 100 years of voting privileges. And that was for women. And several people came to me and said, I know you're excited. What are you going to do? Because I know you deal with that. I says, now explain to me why I'm celebrating. I can celebrate for my sisters, yes, but I didn't have voting rights. And they didn't realize that. The reason why they didn't realize it is because, again, people walk around actually acting as if they're the only people with a story and with experiences. But when it was said and done, a couple of people wrote me a note and said, I never once thought of you not having voting rights. And then when I explained to them, well, you know, when we got the right to vote, don't you? And they were shocked. And one person, a very informed person, said, well, what did you do during all that time? I said, absolutely nothing. We couldn't do anything but watch. So I think it's important that we take time to listen to the stories of each other and learn about the history of others. I think it's important that we open ourselves up to a whole different way of being with one another. And more importantly, you have to stand up. You have to stand up against what we know is wrong, even if you have to stand up by yourselves. And there are times, and I'm the only one, and I tell people all the time, I'm extremely tall, which I'm not. I'm only 4'11.5", but I says, and I will stand up even if I have to stand up on my tiptoes to call the question regarding the injustice, the environment that we live in, the parishes or the churches or religions that we're a part of, and the organizations that we spend our time. And how do I personally engage in addressing the injustice? I always tell people, okay, we do have technology, but believe it or not, there are a lot of people that look like me that do not own a computer and do not have an iPhone. So we have to put things in print. I'm not an ordained minister. My husband is, though. He was the first African-American permanent deacon assigned as the head of 2 Catholic churches. And he made a point of preaching about racial injustice and how we were called to live as brothers and sisters. So indirectly, I made sure that message was going to be preached. And thank God that was where God wanted him. He wanted him to preach that because it was certainly talked about at least twice a month. Outside of that, I have a radio show, and on that radio show, I take the opportunity to say something every Saturday about our call to live as a diverse family with one God as our creator. And have I stepped on a few toes? Yes, I have, but that's part of standing up for what is right. I believe that we have to roll up our sleeves and go to work. I said to a group that I spoke with just last week, he says, so Annette, when do you think this is going to end? I says, I hate to say this, and I am a believer. I know that God exists. I says, but you know, we have some stubbornness with the human race. And I don't see racism being eradicated during my lifetime. And I'm going to skip my daughter. And I says, I don't even see it being eradicated during my grandchild's lifetime. But I do believe that it will be eradicated. The social injustices will always continue if we remain silent. We have got to open our mouths and challenge what we know to be wrong. Use our eyes, canvass the groups that we are members of, and ask yourselves, who's missing from this arena? Ask yourselves, how did this happen? And then what can you do about it? Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Annette. That was really great. So we do have a few minutes left. So what we were hoping to do is kind of break off. Laura and Andy have the in-person group. And then I'm here with the onliners. We're gonna just have a little bit of reflection just to finish off. And then I'm gonna be putting the survey in the chat group. If you guys wanna just fill it out, let us know how you think everything went. And Laura has a quick message about the blue light glasses.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey friends, the only message is if you have your first and last name already in your video that you're joining us from, we will get you a pair of these nifty Blu-ray glasses that you should wear when you're using screen time, which seems to be a lot of the time. And if your first and last name don't show up in your video, if you could just shoot into the chat your name so that Christina can make a note of that so we can get these to you. And if you're not on campus, we'll get them to you also. So no fears. Everybody here can take a pair of Blu-ray glasses. And don't forget to do your surveys. Thank you all so much. Thank you to all of our panelists. We appreciate you. I think that Andy's now sharing our screen so you can see some of our discussion questions. We're going to try to actually break you into two virtual groups so that maybe part of you can chat with those of us who are here in person as well. And we can have some dialogue if Andy can figure out how to turn our.
And looking for breakout rooms.
And if not, we'll just do it virtually and in here. I would just like to have our team be part of our too.
Yeah,
Maybe not.
I'm not seeing breakout.
Okay, that's okay.
Anybody know?
That's okay.
Okay.
We'll let our virtual friends talk amongst yourselves, and so we're going to turn you off on our end, or at least mute, so we cannot hear you. But if everyone there would please feel comfortable either unmuting or at least when you speak, unmuting yourself, and Christina will facilitate the conversation with those of you who are virtual. Thank you all very much for being here. So those of us who are here, do you have us muted now?
Yes.
You might want to just even, I guess it doesn't. Abby has.
All right, thank you friends for joining us. You know, one of the questions we kind of wanted to start with was, you know, what's a message that you heard today that that really resonated with you, something that maybe you didn't think about before, something that just really resonated with you that, you know, you want to share about.
I think that all of us, all the speakers actually agree that we have a lot of work to do. And there is efforts being made in our community. And I think that there is room for hope.
Mm.
Does anybody else want to share any reflections from today?
So did you hear any messages about racial justice talked about during?
Sorry, can I just pause for a second? We're going to combine the two rooms just so that we can all engage in kind of a dialogue together. We just kind of realized that it'll work a little better this way. So you guys, if like to these desks here.
If you all can't hear, just like wave at me or something.
Yeah, can you guys hear us? Okay, great.
All right, can Abby go ahead and ask the second question for us? Yeah.
Do you hear any messages about racial injustice talked about during prayer meetings or services at your own house of worship? Are sacred texts and teachings applied to what's happening in our society today?
I know that in our community, we have what we call virtual devotionals. We used to have them in our homes, and we still do, but now they're virtual. And I, for one, we are encouraged to have devotionals on a regular basis. Individuals, whether it's family, friends, co-workers, and I, for one, have a monthly devotional in my home. And since the pandemic, I have one of a monthly devotional on Zoom. And my next one is actually tomorrow between 1 and 2, that I have invited friends that I choose a topic, a different topic every month. And tomorrow's devotional is basically prayers and meditation. And basically what I do is prepare prayers from all religious, selections from all the religions that I can find, or the major religions, and I put them together and have them as the basis that we share, we read them, and then I invite my people that I've invited to actually bring their own prayers and reflections. And we actually have prayers and meditations for peace, and it usually lasts about an hour. And I really, really believe that if we all do that on a regular basis, that it will make a difference. I truly believe in the prayer, the power of prayer. And that as a community, a worldwide community, if we actually share prayers and meditations with our friends and family on a regular basis, that it makes a difference. If we're all here together, acknowledging that we believe in a higher power